Welcome to Al-Mena, a new generation bringing new ideas of fellowship together with unity. All of our speakers are shared on the WhatsApp audio groups and speaker channels. The links will be dropped in the chat. If you're listening to this recording and you need help, we have a way out that works. Please reach out and send us an email at ca.almina2026@gmail.com and the crew will reach out and get back to you. We have invited Andy H to share a message of depth and weight. Andy, 45 minutes, my friend. The floor is yours.
There we go. Thank you, Pauline. Hey, everybody. My name is Andy. I am blessed beyond measure to be an alcoholic, a cocaine addict, and a whole bunch of other things, but I'll kind of keep it to those two for now. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Mina, my dear friends, and everybody here today, keeping us safe, and everybody that's participating. We've never had this moment before, and here we are in this space experiencing it. And I do have to say something that got me real misty right from the beginning, and it's just going to be one of those. So I have plenty of tissues, and as a conservative, orthodox, fundamental member of CA, that means I cry a lot and I talk about the big book a lot, and I don't apologize for either. But I'll tell you, your intro was just magnificent and beautiful, and going into the lay aside prayer, and what hit me is a new experience with this disease. Yeah, which I'll talk about because I've had some new experiences. And, that makes this journey quite generous. And I'm here for the full catastrophe. So if you're like me, and maybe when you got here, maybe you're just feeling that way today and you've been here a while, whether you're new or not so new, having a tough time, maybe feel like you're, going up the down escalator. What I'm going to talk about is the unmanageability on the inside, and you've given me all these words that describe the feeling that I had all my life. That the best I could do years ago was ask the question I never wanted anybody to know it was, what's wrong with me? And now you put words about it, right? You put words about the unmanageability, the insides being just ill at ease. As it turned out, a spiritual thirst for wholeness. I mean, that's it. That's what this program will give us, is finally to have that thirst quench and know that the idea is to establish a relationship with a power greater than ourselves. Call it God, call it what you will. That's going to fill that hole and continue to guide us, one day at a time, one day at a time. So if you are feeling, like maybe, well, in Texas, in the US, they talk about a mule in a Texas hailstorm. You can't run, you can't hide, and you can't make it stop. If you feel like that, if you feel like maybe there was a great movie in the 1950s called The Sweet Smell of Success, you're already dead, pal. You just need to be buried, was what was said. If you're like me, you just needed to be planted right here and know that everything you did brought you to where you are today, where you belong, home, home. So we got you. You're with us now. Stay with us. I'll be talking a lot about the unmanageability because, see, everything for me had to be thrown out and incinerated and completely, well, just obliterated in order to see the way of life that you've now given me, that you've shared with me now for a while. So again, if you're new and feeling any of those feelings, yeah, we've been there. We may all be with you today. If you feel like you have nothing left, I'm here to tell you that's not what our book says. Page 124 talks very clearly and simply and says this, that our darkest past is our greatest asset. With it, we can avert death and misery for countless others. That's a promise. That's a promise that, is an absolute message of hope for wherever you're at today. So wherever I'm at today, well, I want to talk about that, but I've seen, and actually it's been my experience in Thank goodness for good sponsors that have taught me to do everything I can to get me out of the way. You know, ultimately, I hope what I say today is what God intended me to say. I will help at least one of you, and maybe the majority, maybe all of you. I know it's going to be helping me. And as I feel myself being pulled around right now, being tugged, there's a what's happened for me and terrified me in the beginning when my sponsor Jerry said it was that CA was going to shake the truth out of you, right? And here it comes, the best way, the best way I can speak today is to ask God to speak through me. So I use a prayer that was taught to me some years ago by folks in Chicago and AA, that in city of Chicago, whatever AA meeting I went to for a few days, they said this prayer and I was drawn to it. And it was the beginning of my journey to discover Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton is an incredible spiritual teacher who's given us so much, who's said so much, prayed so much. The spirit of him is not hard to connect to. So it seems like my journey is about the journey for Thomas Merton. And little did I know that a few years, ago, I was to find myself where he lived and prayed for many years. It's an abbey called the Abbey of Gismani in Kentucky. And I found myself with a few of you that I met on Zoom that I had never seen in person. And we're sitting there and we're just in the most peaceful, quiet place. In, in that place, you're allowed to try to emulate the monks, which means you can follow them around and start their day, which is pretty much very structured and is at 3:30 in the morning. So I found out that, that I'm not going to be a monk, but that's okay. I'm not in the monking business. So Thomas Merton said something like this: we care for ourselves in the service of others. Boy, that sounds an awful lot like our 12th step, right? Carrying this message to the still suffering, practicing these principles in all our affairs. What principles? Love, tolerance, and others is our code. Being awake, being aware, being accountable, being authentic, and being available. That wasn't me until I got to you. So in this prayer, it's a prayer of unknowing. My Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I'm doing. I hope I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will do your will always. I will continue to search for your will, though I may know nothing about it. And I know that I will be safe and protected in that desire to please you. Amen. So today, right here, right now, I'm sober because I have a absolute direct experience with our step one, which means that to drink or to use cocaine is to die. There's no negotiation. There's no debate about that today. And I went through a period of debate for sure years ago, but not today. To drink is to die. And I cannot live off an old first step experience. That might take me back to step 0, which I'll talk about, which is on page 30, where I'm defending my right to drink and use cocaine. Today, that experience allows me to continue on this journey through the steps and get to a place where in 1 through 9, I get elevated, I get slingshotted into the world of the spirit. 10, 11, and 12, the strict spiritual disciplines, which allow me and allow all of us to progress in our sobriety. What is progression in sobriety today for me? It is enlarging and contemplating and feeling the roar of God's embrace. And between those elements, I get to live a life well beyond anything that I ever could have imagined. The unmanageability in that first step, which I'll talk about, it seems a fair amount right now, because that befuddled me when I got to you. That unmanageability, the other side of the dash that connects the physical and the mental side to the spiritual side on the inside, which has always been thirsty for something more. That unmanageability has been translated in multiple languages. I encourage everybody to have a look and see what the translation might look for a big book in a language other than English. My experience has shown me that in French, it says, I've lost the mastery of my life. In Spanish, I live an ungovernable life. In Japanese, we could not live the lives we wanted. And in Polish, an uncontrollable or not steerable life. That raging inside, not fitting in anywhere, is nobody's fault. Though I thought it was when I got to you and I blamed everybody for the state I was in. I blame my mother, who was married 4 times. I used to say, you know, she's married 4 times and still available. See me after the meeting. I thought that was kind of funny at the time, but I've come to realize it really wasn't. Um, Husband number 2 was my birth father, came back from World War II and was completely lost and broken. I didn't know anything. I'm 7 years old and he was gone. So there starts the abandonment, right? You know. And husband number 3 is a serial domestic violence perpetrator who beat us up, put us in the hospital, terrorized us. And get this, my mother married him knowing that because he did it to a previous family before my mother met him and married him. That doesn't make me an alcoholic, or a cocaine addict. So I was born separate, apart, and different with this hole in my belly with the wind blowing through it. And it's that search for wholeness that is finally solved by these 12 steps. It was explained to me that you can't treat cancer with a foot massage. And that's what we have here. We have the treatment of a lifetime in our 12 steps, the formula for sobriety, the formula for God, and the formula for the good life. Or some people say the instruction manual for the enfoldment of our souls. My sponsor, Jerry, said it like this. Jerry was very clear because he saw in my eyes that I was dying because I was still in the dungeon of self when I got to you. And he said to me, AA or CA without the 12 steps is like pouring maple syrup on a pile of crap and expecting it to taste like French toast. So no steps, no program. No steps, no change. No steps, no spiritual awakening. That's just the reality of it. So I've got this hole in my belly with the wind blowing through it that alcohol seemed to fix initially. See, I'm a child of the 70s, so my first time I got out of myself, was smoking a joint and getting lost out of a house party somewhere, in Queens, New York, in New York City. But then I quickly discovered alcohol. See, I didn't like that feeling that the marijuana gave me at the time. It just got me just completely, I don't know. I didn't like that feeling. I wanted to be exhilarated. I didn't want to be, laying down on a couch completely out of my mind. So in summer camp at age 15, when I was offered some ice cold beer, now that ultimately was what I was missing. See, I didn't know what I was missing until I had that first drink at age 15, when I moved from the outside of the circle to the inside, and I was now electrified. Everything came together, right? All those feelings of not fitting in, living life like an ingrown hair, trying to fit in anywhere, but feeling that no one wanted me there, no matter what. And that's nobody's fault either. That's just how I came into the world. And I would petition you all if you're here and you feel like Bruce Springsteen said in the song like this, he said, it's a sad man who's living in his own skin and can't stand the company. Welcome home. Welcome home. If you feel like what Mark Twain said, that the worst loneliness is not to be comfortable with yourself. Welcome home. If you feel like in our 12 by 12 traditions and 12 concepts and 12 steps, that you feel these pangs of anxious apartness, welcome home. If you feel restless, irritable, and discontented, as we talk about in the doctor's opinion, meaning you're restless, you can't sit still, you're irritable, you're easily annoyed, and you're discontented, wherever you go is not the place to be. I mean, I felt that parading around the New York City club scene in the 70s and the 80s and into the 90s. There had to be a better scene somewhere else. It didn't matter that I was at Studio 54, which everybody wanted to get into, and I had a guy that was able to get me in. No. See, I would tell you things even back then that weren't true. So I developed this sense of entitlement and lying. I would say, that I saw Mick Jagger in Studio 54. Now, Mick Jagger was at Studio 54. Maybe he was there when I was, but I never saw him. And I would tell you I did. And suddenly, I'm switching music scenes because, it can't be disco anymore. It's got to be new wave and punk. So I'm sitting in a place called Danceteria where Madonna shot all those videos in the 1980s on MTV. And I'm telling you, I saw Madonna. Restless, irritable, and discontented. It goes even deeper, though, on page 52. Page 52 is the torture page. It's a page that describes being bedeviled, being tortured, being ripped apart from the inside out. Can't get along with people. Full of fear. Can't make a living. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about living with oneself. Wow. So when alcohol, seemed to work at age 15, I paraded around for a few years and then cocaine came on the scene. So I'm part of that scene that's been, I don't know, kind of memorialized and maybe feels a little bit sensationalized, as cocaine was hitting New York City in a big, big way. Movies like Scarface, series like Miami Vice, all those things. And once cocaine hit, boy, 2 shots of Jameson and 2 lines of cocaine in one nostril, I was good. And that set me on my journey now, to get back to the time when that was all that was needed. And that progression kicked in. Took 30 years. Took 30 years to bring me to my knees. And along the way, there were good times. I described them. There were. Somehow I was able, by God's grace, to stay out of trouble when it came to DUIs, going to dealers' houses in the middle of the night, waiting on the dealer. Because, when cocaine called, I ran. It didn't matter. I had, a wife and kids at home. I'm reminded that it's going to be St. Patrick's Day, in a couple of weeks. And I remember one time, my brother-in-law and I, we just left to go into New York City, and we had family at home, and we were gone for hours just, because cocaine called. Yeah. So 30 years of that, being kicked to death by a bunch of rabbits, as some people talk about, led me to this place where every day was the same. And I'm in the summer of 2005, I should say that I did take a trip to London in the summer of 2003, That's the summer when Beyonce hit it with, Crazy in Love. It was all over, in London at the time. I lost my mind in London. I went back a couple more times. I can't tell you how many times. No idea. And each time, I got deeper and deeper into the madness, right? Carrying cocaine on planes. And I've got a job, a good job. I got promoted during this period of time, 2003, 2005, and I'm out of my mind and I can't stop. So I come to 2005 and I've got 3 conversations. I start drinking in the morning after I drop my daughter Lauren off at school. Lauren is here today, right now. Lauren just had a baby a few months ago. Her name is Blair. So I'm a grandfather today. A and CA and all of you, good sponsorship, and the men and women I've been blessed to sponsor, Save That Light. that life that you see in front of you today with my family. But Lauren's in junior high or high school, and I'm taking her to school, and then suddenly I'm going and driving 40 miles to a job, and the whole point of the job was to get away from my family so I can go drink and use. And I end up on this beautiful highway overlooking Manhattan, New York City, and I have three conversations. One of them is, let me drive my car over the embankment and just end it all. No, I'm not going to do that. Maybe I should just go home and tell Susan. No, I'm not going to do that. Maybe it's not that bad. I'm going to continue on. See, I am stuck in the frame and I can't look in the mirror. I could not look at myself in the mirror anymore. And often I hear that from other people, that the idea of looking in the mirror was necessarily impossible. I know that place. It's been described in a great short story by Oscar Wilde called The Picture of Dorian Gray. Picture 1800s England, London maybe. Dorian Gray is this, man about town. Everybody envies him. He's, just successful in every way. And he has this painting made, a portrait, and it gets put in a closet. 10 years go by and everybody ages and they look at Dorian and they go, wait a minute, you look the same. People are getting suspicious, but one day he looks in the closet, opens it, and sees the painting, and it's absolutely revolting, disgusting. He can't look at it anymore. And that was me. But see, I was in the grips of this disease, and it was pulling me apart piece by piece, and no one knew. No one knew. It's interesting now because, how this disease likes to talk to you, right? The disease, a while back was talking to me like, well, was I that good a liar? Or maybe no one was paying attention. It just, for me, again, talks about how powerful this disease is to twist me around to think that somebody should have noticed, somebody should have caught me, along the way. But the problem was that maybe your life was like this when you came in. My life was not a hot mess when I got to you in 2005. It was more like I was an icicle and I was able to still soldier on. King alcohol and king cocaine had me, but I was still able to soldier on because, see, if you looked at my life from the outside, you'd say, well, wife and two kids, good job, house, coaching the kids, still able to drink and drug and coach them, which I did. Still coming home at night at some point. All of that was true. The best analogy I heard was that my life, I was like a swan, right? Swan glides through the air majestically, lands on a bottle of water, and underneath a body of water, and is paddling like hell, paddling like hell. So that was me. And then what happened? As every day was the same, and I'm getting more and more despicable, more separated, impossible to go on, I got caught. Susan, who's upstairs from here, we're married 41 years. There's been new awakenings in that relationship, it kind of gets back to what I wrote, the new experience with this disease, because I will tell you that this disease will take anybody and use them. Sometimes the people that love you the most, but understand you the least, the disease will speak through them. And this cannot be negotiated. Sobriety can't be negotiated. But I'll get back to that. So Susan catches me because money's missing, and this champion liar did not lie. Apparently, God separated me in that moment from me, and there was a pause. And in that pause, Susan says, "What's wrong?" And it's right in the big book, right? What's right in the big book? She asked me, "Do I have cancer?" And in the book, Bill talks about, one that has cancer is instantly given empathy. Instantly, what can I do to help? The tears come and everything. There was another pause, and I didn't lie. I said, I think I'm an alcoholic. I didn't admit the cocaine use just yet because she didn't know about all the money that was missing. That was more than what that she found. She was to find more, I often say if by God's grace, I came in 2003 and 2005, I would have saved a lot of money, but it didn't work out that way. So she tells me the money's missing and I don't lie. And in that moment, um, everything changed. There was a spiritual moment in that moment. There was a spiritual, I wouldn't say awakening, but there was an experience there. See, God paralyzed the liar in me. I ran out of lies, and that began my journey to you. And that journey involved a rehab. From that moment, a rehab in which I went in, got thrown out because I couldn't give you clean urine. I was doing drugs in the parking lot, going back in and saying I'm okay. But the fact of the matter was, I was had my head down, could not pick my head up, cried ice cold tears, and I said nothing. But from that experience, the next step, as God's grace had me, was to sit, was to do this, was to tell me that my recovery didn't start in step 0 on page 30. It started not in step 1, but it started in your 12th step, in your hearts. You came into that facility, supplied me with something, got me out, and helped me crash into my home group, the same home group that I have today, Bagels, Love, and Fellowship, the morning after group. Some of you have been there. It's on Zoom. It's been on Zoom for 6 years. It's still bricks and mortar in a big old church in Westwood, New Jersey. You know, can't you see the morning after? It's waiting right outside the storm. Why don't we cross the bridge together and find a place that's safe and warm? You know, that's an old song, a beautiful old song by Maureen McGovern. I didn't want any of that when I came to you. I just wanted to be left alone. But as I tripped down those steps, you know, and came into the roar of laughter, the roar of just bagels, love, fellowship, spilling coffee, arguments, jokes, hugs. I just wanted to get to the other side of the room, which seemed like a football field, and be left alone. But no one let me. What they said to me was, welcome home. And they said to me something else that to this day has taken on another meaning. They said, we're going to love you until you can love yourself. But what they also said and meant was, we're going to love you so you can learn to love others. Excuse me. I had a family, you know, I provided for them. I love my kids. I love my wife. Nah, that wasn't there. I was defective in every relationship. Every relationship was about me. Buy me, bring me, give me, or I'd steal it. I was a champion thief, not just of money, but of also emotional sobriety for people. I had no skills, no grace. Um, and what you showed me was that moving from a greedy soul to approach a servant's heart is possible with these 12 steps. See, California sunlight, sweet Calcutta rain, Honolulu starbright, the song remains the same, the solution remains the same, and I'll come back to these steps. That's the beauty of it. And as the result of these steps, what's happened for me is, well, this is the greatest love story of the 20th and 21st century because I've learned and continue to learn what love is, which means what God is. And that search, of course, Thomas Merton said, any idea about God isn't, you know, no human words that we can put to it can approach it, but that's okay. We can keep seeking. See, today, I'm just a sober guy on duty, a restless God seeker. And being a restless people pleaser for so long was what it was all about for me. And through these steps, I've had new and wonderful experiences. So in Bill's story, when he says, the real significance of the cathedral, the experience of the cathedral, going into the cathedral that he talks about, right, burst upon me. A new world came into view. And I'd like to take some time to tell you about that. You know, what's the new world that's come into view? See, I needed to be a receiver of your love before I could be a giver. because I had no idea what giving was. Um, this sense of entitlement, this sense of trying to get my sense of who I am by what you think of me was dominating me from Jump Street, an unfillable void that was already there. See, in people pleasing, what I want you to like me. And the flip of that is envy. I want to be like you. So I'm torn and twisted in ways that I don't even know. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning. What's happened for me is that as the result of these steps, I've been able to, with good sponsorship, and again, I can't say enough about sponsorship because the point of that is to learn how to be a sponsor for others. This is a sponsor creation program. And what's happened for me is that through good sponsorship, we've sat on these pages. We've sat on these pages over and over again because this is a book, a mirror, the big book. It's a book where you can look in a microscope or a telescope and find yourself on these pages. The first thing that had to happen was that I needed to know that I was one of you, which I described, but I'll say it again. I have a 3-part disease, a physical allergy to cocaine and alcohol. When I take a drink or a drug, the drink takes me and the drug takes me. I don't stop until I run out, pass out, or get locked up. If that's not enough, I have a fatal obsession, the obsession, the mental illness that takes me back to the glory days when alcohol and cocaine seemed to piece me together. What that was an artificial way to a spiritual experience. And these 12 steps are a bona fide way to a spiritual awakening, but I needed to go through that pain, right? God doesn't waste pain, and the pain of being broken down to know that I'm doomed, right? With that powerlessness in both ways. And then if that's not enough, the roots that I talked about, the unmanageability, the disease is rooted in a lack of a sense of wholeness. And if you ask me what I'm most grateful for, it's the pain that brought me to my knees. See, there's one thing about going from your head to your heart. Sometimes that's the longest distance, but I believe the longest distance is from your knees to the floor. And I needed to be crushed and see I was one of you. And with that freedom that came to finally belong somewhere, I had this sense that since I was found out, I'm going to be okay. This sense of belonging. But there's more. There's harm that's been done. You could call it another part of this disease. I put enough harm out into the world, and that needed to be healed. So through the immense process, over and over, going back through my past, but also where I am today, that sense of belonging has finally come. Some of those powerful moments in my life have been amends. I think there may be a little time to talk about that, but I do want to mention the things that right are on the tip of my tongue that I believe God is pushing me to say. See, there's no negotiation here now, right? The fact that I've been a champion people pleaser, right, means that character defect, which ultimately is a reflection of fear, because all character defects are ignited. The ignition switch is self-centered fear. And because of that being rooted so strongly, I found that the disease can actually use that, right? Can actually take that and manipulate the thinking in my head so that, well, maybe you don't need to go to that meeting. Maybe you're doing too much, no matter what I've said, that the 2 most important days of my life was when I was born and found out why, which means to stay sober and help somebody else, to help lead people as I've been led to an experience with this book. Yeah, I can go back to the core delusion. What's the core delusion? The world exists to make me happy, meaning I want you to be happy, me to be right, and me to be perfect. But no, this world, the expression of this world as God would have it, wants me to be conscious. So I needed to get more conscious, which needed there needed to be more pain. And the idea of that this pain has to be sat with. It's an invitation from God because others have said, if God is everything, why are you sweating? Just step into the furnace and go through it. So it had to do with my family, my wife and kids, about the threats that I felt to my sobriety. This is fairly recent stuff. It's not true today, but it was a dilemma, right? A discord that had to be worked out. And I had to see on page 76, right? The beauty of 6 and 7 is that it's on 76. So it's, at least in my mind, relatively easy to find. It's 2 paragraphs. It's the thin road because if you think of the first number of steps until you get to step 6, 1 through 5, it's kind of a broad highway. But now you go through this narrow, it's not a flimsy reed, right? This is the hand of God. And then you come out the other side in which God goes from being in the third step decision. You're asking God to be a director. But if you look at the 7-step prayer and you get to that place, you see that now we're talking about not just trust reliance, but we're talking about abandonment, right? This is a problem way bigger. So on 76, we're asked direct questions in step 6. What am I clinging to? What am I holding on to? Am I still trying, to manage life? Right? I've fired, myself has been fired and I've hired God. So what am I still trying to, wrest satisfaction if I please somebody? I have a spiritual malady that no one can see. You all can see it. See, this is the love that we have for each other. When I talk about we love each other and I love all of you, what I mean is that I sense myself in you and hopefully you sense yourself in me. And we have a connectivity that is indescribable. I mean, listen, we're the ones that talk about the gift of desperation. Who talks about the gift of desperation but us? Yeah, get desperate. That's what we got to do is get desperate. But the thing is that God doesn't meet us in the depths of our desperation. God meets us in the depths of our surrender. So it's a constant surrendering, a constant seesaw going back and forth. So in step 6, what do I find that's objectionable? The stuff I can't stand about myself anymore. Yeah. What am I clinging to? And I'll read a direct statement. I'm clinging to the idea that my wife and kids can understand the pain that's within my soul that's needed to be handed over to God. That has to stop. That has to stop. What also comes up again is stop doing for others what they can do for themselves. That's something that kind of hangs on, a little bit. Yeah. Because if I'm not careful, see the old Coldplay song warnings, right? Warning sign, the warnings are there. I don't want to go back to what, Shakespeare said, hell is empty and all the devils are here, you know. I don't want to go back to what Rod Stewart said, every picture tells a story. I spent some time feeling inferior, standing in front of my mirror, comb my hair 1,000 different ways, and I came out just looking the same. That's down the road if this isn't addressed. And what's come from me is the meaning of the statement that we often say, whatever you put in front of your sobriety is the first thing you're going to lose. The deeper meaning, I believe, is whatever you put in front of your sobriety is going to be lost. So there had to come to a place with an understanding. There had to become a place where finally, I saw that I needed to preserve and protect my sobriety. My life is on the line. And no one else can do that for me. No one else can pick up the strict spiritual tools that are laid on our feet. That's the only choice today. See, our program promises sanity in the 10th step, right? That the problem's been removed. In a recovered state, I have no choice but to not drink and use. In an unrecovered state, I have no choice but to drink and use. The choice doesn't come back. But the choice, right? And that's important. The choice that is always there is to pick up the strict spiritual tools. So with good sponsorship and heading into the 7th step, I asked God to remove all this stuff. And it ended up happening that just like that cathedral experience, a new world came into view. Susan and I and my kids, we sat down and spoke about it. And I explained again that there are no days off here. There just aren't, you know? And that period passed. That period passed. These cathedral moments that come, a few of them I want to mention. One of them was, and this is just God, you know, it's just God. I was newly sober, probably about 6 months or a year in, and I'm driving on the New Jersey Turnpike. It's about 40 miles to get to work, and I'm driving on there, and I see this huge church steeple. Right now, be that as it may, you know, I come into church basements in New Jersey. All the meetings are in church basements. And, you know, everybody seems to be Irish Catholic from the Bronx, New York, you know, they have 6 or 7 brothers and sisters. I'm this Jewish kid from Brooklyn, New York, whose mother's had 4 husbands. So, yeah. And this beautiful church steeple stuck out to me, and I got to find it, you know. Once we get a little obsession going, right, all of us, we got to, you know. I was going to walk there, you know, if I couldn't find it, but I found it. It's a church called Queen of Peace in North Arlington, New Jersey. And I went in the chapel. I got hysterical crying, you know. And about a few months later, I go back to the rehab that I got thrown out of. They asked me to speak there. See, that's the beauty of it, right? And I end up talking to a guy. He asked me to sponsor him, and we get talking, and he says, yeah, you know, I'm from North Arlington. I go, really? He goes, yeah. Goes, yeah, you know, I go to Queen of Peace. And I go, yeah, of course. Right. And he has family members buried in the cemetery outside the church. Um, the beautiful synchronicity that we see here, the glimmers that go on and on and on. On that journey to go to work every day, you know, my job had me for almost 30 years, you know, drunk and high for a good portion of them, and then sober for a while. And the question that was always asked, you know, was why did they keep me? A lot of incredible reorganizations, right? And I'm still standing, you know, for some reason. And I sought, you know, for that explanation for years until finally um, I was moved by someone who said, we need speakers to go into a maximum security prison here in New Jersey. And I kind of put up my hand, and there I was. And about 6 months later, I'm sitting in that prison, sitting with these guys, some of them with life sentences. They're not getting out. Some of them are getting out. And I'm sitting there and as a guest, right? And I have the honor to sit around with this book and go through the steps. Some of those guys were sober a long time. Some of them were newly sober. Some of them were just visiting. And I find out that eventually some of them get out and they live crime-free lives, sober lives. What a gift to go behind the walls. I recommend that to anybody, right? Those are the people that are truly, truly, you know, in need. And you have no idea what can be said in there that will suddenly light them up along the way. What a privilege to do that. So if you ask me why I was kept around so long at work, I believe it was to go to that prison, right? Eventually I ended up in there as a guest. Yeah. Today, I'm left with this to talk about. I'm left with that, again, the cathedral experience. What's this going to be like when the going gets particularly rough, right? Program is here, no matter what, to take us through the moments that are incredibly joyous, but incredibly tragic. And our book talks about that. A couple of years ago, um, our daughter Lauren got married, and I've spoken about that. It was this beautiful, beautiful wedding, and for whatever reason, we also had great weather. Uh, it's a custom in the States, particularly in New Jersey, of the father of the bride getting to see the bride, before everyone else is in her dress. And you want to picture this. I'm facing this lake, waiting for Lauren to tap me on the shoulder, and it seems like forever. And finally, she taps me on the shoulder. I turn around, and we're hysterical crying. I don't mean just like little tears. I mean like snot-nosed tears, right? You know that. And in that moment, and I'll finish here, um, indescribable. And then later, I get to say some things at the reception. I get to say that love is patient, love is kind, love always rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always hopes, and always perseveres. Lauren and Nick are a couple for the ages who met during the pandemic, fell in love, and decided to share their lives together, forever singing. Then I look at you, and the world is all right by me. Just one look at you, and I know it's going to be a lovely day. That's Bill Withers. But just like what Pharrell Williams said in the song Happy, that your life is like a room without a roof. What does that mean? Around that same time, a beloved member of our family, everybody's best friend, Barbara, passed away from cancer. This was one of those cancers that you get it and you're like, gone. And I said at her funeral, I was blessed to be asked to say something. And I said, the wind in Barbara's life is now the wind in our lives. The wind is simply crossed over. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters most is how we live and how we spend our dash. How do we spend our dash? Linda Ellis wrote that. It's the time on our tombstone, that line, we're born, and when we cross over, you all showed me how to use my dash. And you're constantly telling me. Being teachable, a willingness to be led, because see, in a story called Crossing the River of Denial, Karen R. from Florida, who sometimes you'll see on Zoom, she said this: I practice the 12 steps to the best of my willingness each day. Doesn't say anything about ability. That would be taking ego. The willingness. Why? Because God expresses him or herself in willingness. And when I'm willing, I'm changed. That's what you taught me. So if you're here today and no one said they love you, boy, I love you. Formula for sobriety, the formula for God, the formula for good life is the 12 steps. You can stay sick and see you have plenty of company, or you can get well and see you have plenty of company. If anyone is stuck in any place, put my number in the chat if you want to chat, particularly on page 30. That's the negotiation, the doomsday page. Don't leave until the miracle happens, and don't leave when the miracle happens. This is the age of miracles. Bill Wilson said our own recovery proves that. We have it right here, right now, everything we need. So just stay with us. Welcome home. Dorothy said that. Well, she didn't say that, but Glenda, the Good Witch of the East, said that in The Wizard of Oz. Glenda said, there's no place like home. And then she said, click your heels. You've always had the power. The power is here. The power is now. Stay with us. Thank you for having me. Love you, Pauline and Mena. And love everybody else on the call. Thank you. That's it.